Why is Costco suing the Trump administration, and why is Costco suing now? I haven't seen any really good legal analysis out there, so I thought I would give you my 2 cents. Now, Costco has filed suit before the U.S. Supreme Court renders its decision in the tariff challenge. Essentially, what has happened is organizations have challenged Trump imposing these tariffs. He's unilaterally done it. Tariffs are a tax. Taxes are normally something that has to be decided on in Congress. Only Congress and the Senate, through the legislative branch, can impose taxes. And so Trump imposing these tariffs has been challenged to the U.S. Supreme Court. Typically, it takes 2 to 4 months to get a decision from the U.S. Supreme Court, and this was argued back in November, so we're going to get a decision sometime probably early in the new year. And Costco has preemptively sued, along with some other major organizations, the Trump administration, to try and get their tariff money back. And they've done this strategically now for some very good reasons. They want that lawsuit, of course, filed before the tariff decision comes out. Now, the court may rule that Trump exceeded his authority. If that's the case, it's an unlawful extraction collecting this money. If he had no legal authority to collect the money, then whoever paid it gets to get the money back, typically. But the federal government is going to do everything it can to try and avoid paying. Now, the federal government is likely to argue that Costco passed these expenses on to the consumers, and therefore Costco shouldn't get the money back, basically because Costco suffered no damages. And they're also going to argue that it would be administratively impossible to refund the money that they've collected, just because it would be such an onerous task, and that it would cause economic disruption if they had to do that. Of course, this would be a ton of money going back. And they would also argue that because they are the government, they can not pay damages. That's basically the position that I expect them to take. Costco is suing now and made the decision to file their lawsuit before the U.S. Supreme Court renders its decision, essentially as a placeholder, as an anchor to say, look, these are the claims that we've got, these are the claims we're making, and to ensure administratively that they've procedurally got this matter before the court, before the decision has been rendered by the U.S. Supreme Court. So Costco's trying to preemptively ensure that the government can't raise these specific arguments later, particularly like the pass-through argument, saying the expenses were passed through onto the consumers and therefore Costco doesn't get the money back. And so they filed this basically to deal with this legal obstacle and to make sure that they can't raise that issue later. And probably I anticipate that they're going to argue that the tariffs interrupted their supply, distorted the supply chain. It also will have affected sales, so there's lost revenue on the basis of the fact that they made fewer sales because the prices were higher, so there's lost income there that will be difficult for Costco to calculate. That an unlawful tax, when collected, is unlawful and has to be paid back, and there's plenty of precedent for that. And regardless, you don't get to claim that the economic pass-through, that the pass-through to the final consumer permits a government to impose an unlawful tax. The unlawful tax has to be paid back. It's unlawful. And of course, the government can't enrich itself just by imposing unlawful taxes and then coming back later and saying, well, it was very difficult, and besides, it was passed through to other people, and therefore we shouldn't have to pay it back. So why are they doing it now? Well, they're trying to preempt arguments that the Trump administration is ultimately going to attempt to claim. One of them is going to be, or that they anticipate, is retroactive application. So in other words, Trump's administration may come back and say, look, this has been essentially ratified by Congress because they haven't done anything about it. And by filing beforehand, they're giving notice that no, Congress has not allowed the tariffs by essentially implicitly ratifying it by not doing anything. So that's the first thing that they're trying to head off. They're also trying to head off the whole idea of the equitable impossibility, so the idea that it would be too difficult to pay that money back. They're saying, no, we're giving you notice now. You can start getting organized and make sure you're prepared to pay us back the money that we didn't have to pay, that we shouldn't have had to pay. And they're also setting this up for the damages down the road, so they can say, look, we're keeping track of what our damages are because we've known that this is an unlawful law, and you're going to have to pay us back these damages. And we're talking like billions of dollars, right, for all of these tariffs that have been unlawfully collected, and tons of money for Costco. So it's worth Costco's money to preserve that standing causation and damages argument by filing beforehand. Costco is anticipating that the tariffs are going to be found illegal, that Trump exceeded his authority when he unilaterally invoked tariffs. And Canada's been waiting on this too, obviously. But they want to make sure that the U.S. government can't come back and say, well, sure, it was illegal, but we're keeping the money. And that's the reason that they filed their lawsuit when they have. They don't want the government to come back and say, sure, we took the money illegally, but we're not going to refund it. They want basically to force the government to be in a position where it has to be refunded, because the government's going to try and rely on the optics of this is going to cost the taxpayers a lot of money. But Costco, if they are successful, and I anticipate the tariffs will be found illegal, is going to be getting back a lot of money. And it's money that consumers paid, yeah, for sure. And Costco might pass some of those savings on to consumers. But money that has been unlawfully acquired, unlawfully gained through an unlawful tax has to be paid back. And so even if it costs the U.S. taxpayers, and even if it costs just administratively, hundreds of millions of dollars to sort it out, the U.S. government's going to be on the hook. And this is just going to be another one of Trump's many failures that cost the U.S. consumers and U.S. companies, U.S. businesses, billions and billions of dollars. So Costco is very strategic here. They've thought about it. They know what they're doing. And that's the reason that they've filed the lawsuit in anticipation of the decision from the U.S. Supreme Court, again, which we expect early in the new year.